Badger Politic. I'm Scott Stearns.
Yep, this is Paul Sickle.
How's it going, Paul?
Well, not as well as we'd hoped since the last time we talked.
Yeah, the last time we talked, it was shortly before the spring elections, and obviously there's a lot to talk about there, a lot to digest.
It was around the time that the Republicans were getting really good at redacting lines in the Miller report.
So the redacted report is due out Thursday of this week, so we'll see what percentage of the overall report is Sharpied away.
Yeah, don't try to buy Sharpies within the belt line. I'm sure that there's been a run on them. The cost has gone through the roof.
Yeah, I think so. Good news is that Milwaukee Brewers are off to a hot start. Christian Yelich, 8 home runs overall, I think. He hit 3 of them tonight against St. Louis Cardinals.
Very different, though, about this team is they're very much more of a slugfest kind of team.
Yes.
Compared to last year. They don't have the bullpen.
They don't have the bullpen. The starting pitching, I think, the starting rotation is not going to look like it does currently at the end of the season if they're going to make a run.
No, and I think the starting pitching is basically a work in progress. It's not surprising to me to see them struggle because I don't think they were that good last year either. I think they were just being protected by a very nice bullpen.
Yeah,
that was able to give them 5 innings, then the bullpen would take care of the rest.
Well, and you had Peralta tonight, and he's had some good games so far, but he also has those games where he has an inning where he struggles.
No.
And that was the case against tonight. They had to bring the bullpen in early and just kind of power through. And obviously, Yelich having 7 RBI tonight was a big difference in the 10-7 victory.
Right. I mean, the Brewers last year were an above-average pitching team with average offense that got better as Yelich heated up, and they brought in some extra depth down the stretch. And they became a little bit more of an offensive force, even as the bullpen became even more dominant until they finally tired out against Los Angeles, really, in the last NLCS. This year, it almost looks like the opposite, where it's like a slugfest from the get-go with slightly, right now, below-average pitching.
Yeah.
But it looks like their ticket to the playoffs will generally be average pitching, and a lot of bats,
a lot of offense.
So very much like more of a 1982, like an 80s Brewers kind of team.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what kind of starting pitching they're able to.
That's if it works, by the way.
Yeah, and it may not.
Right.
Their bullpen should improve. Now they're getting Jeremy Jeffress back now, so we'll see how soon he's able to kind of slot back into that closer's role because obviously. Hader has been filling that role, but they really need him in that setup, lefty position.
Right.
He's done very well doing what he's doing, and if Jeffress isn't able to get it done in the closer's role, obviously he's the heir apparent.
Right.
Because we have Knable out with Tommy John surgery the rest of the year. So.
Right. So, but I mean, the roles of the bullpen don't matter that much.
Yeah.
It's about who can
get it done when.
Right, and do you have enough people that can really get it done?
Yeah.
And I would argue that if you have Jeffries back with alongside Hader, you're probably going to have enough juice to stitch it all together.
It could be a platoon situation for the closer, at least in the interim.
Well, either that or you got a really good setup. And I mean, last year the whole year was a platoon.
That's true.
I mean, right through the playoffs. I mean, like I said, I don't think the role matters. I think you've got 2 solid arms back there that can get you outs when necessary. And I think that you lose that being down to just Hader in that role is what. It makes the thing really precarious. You need another top-notch arm.
You need some help.
And the question is whether Jeffrey's can do it or not.
We shall see. Another thing in progress, local sports team-wise, is the Milwaukee.
The better local sports team.
The Milwaukee Bucks are in the playoffs.
At least as of now.
And,
best team in the NBA.
Played the Detroit Pistons in Game 1 yesterday and just kind of wiped the floor.
They looked like a number 1 seed.
Yeah, it was dominant. Yeah. It wasn't even close. It was one.
It looked unfair. Honestly.
And added to that, so the final score was 121-86. However, I don't think that truly is indicative of how dominant the Bucks played because
Giannis only was in 24 minutes.
Right. The last half of the fourth quarter. It was the bench
Yeah, I think you see Giannis average maybe 20 minutes a game this series.
We'll see
if it goes the way we want it to.
I mean, and they're starting to get healthy again too. I mean, people forget that towards the end of the season, they were missing some key pieces. They were missing Brogdon. Mirotic was out. Gasol is still out. So as they get deeper into the playoffs, they're going to get some of these key pieces back, which is only going to improve their situation.
I got to say, I really hope the Pacers give the Celtics at least a good series. Wear them out a little bit.
Right.
I don't believe the Pacers are going to win it, but if they can at least keep it interesting, that'll help the Bucks out a lot.
The Bucks would rather, you think, face the Pacers, just given the history during the regular
season.
Well,
of course, but I don't think they're going to. My point is that if they could slow down the Celtics just a little bit, make the Celtics play
take it to 7 games,
7 games,
right? Wear them down.
I mean, I'd be happy with 6.
Right. And hopefully the Bucks are able to get out of this thing in 4 or 5 games and get a few days off to sit back and relax.
Yeah,
get healthy again.
That's what I'm looking for. We'll see if that occurs. Let me see when they're next playing here.
Well, the Bucks play Wednesday.
Oh, they're on at the same time.
Oh.
And then 8 p.m. Eastern.
Let's do some channel switching.
Channel surfing it is,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wait, is this the Badger sport?
It's increasingly looking like that.
Maybe after losing his elections, pretty depressing.
When you have things like the Hagedorn victory, I guess the incentive for us is to kind of spend more time on good news.
Right. So that was a real reality check. I got
it was. I mean, there's a lot to take away from that.
Not much good.
We tempered our expectations somewhat, thinking that it's not going to be.
We thought the GOP would have somewhat of a jacked up base, but we didn't realize.
But not to the extent.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So I think we predicted basically that the margin was going to be like half what it was in the Dowd election. It didn't turn out to be.
I think I went a little closer.
Yeah. But it doesn't really matter. It was a 6,000 vote margin.
Yeah, I was wrong.
For Hagedorn, and out of 1.2 million votes cast.
The number of votes cast doesn't really surprise me.
Very, very close. Very, very close margin of victory for Hagedorn. But still, why was it that close, and why didn't she seal the deal?
I thought, looking from a bird's eye view, that it would be very close, mm-hmm. and it would be a high turnout. As he got into the cycle, it looked like Hagedorn really was kind of down for the count.
Yeah.
And it didn't look like he was connecting to his base. It was obvious that he was trying to do that at the end, mm-hmm. but not being the intended target of their advertising. I knew they were spending a lot of money in the last week.
Obviously,
they hadn't spent much.
Very targeted to motivate their base to get out there. You saw across the state of Wisconsin that turnout was up. It was up in both liberal areas and conservative areas.
Just at the right time.
It was up a higher percentage in Trump counties, I guess, for lack of a better word. And it was up in Milwaukee, but not enough.
I wrote in December in a memo, if we had 586,000 votes, we'd win. We had just 598,000. So we exceeded it and lost. So, obviously, they have better analytics, frankly, mm-hmm. when it comes to pulling out tight races, especially with, I think with a lower turnout profile, where there's more potential to energize people to vote who don't normally vote in these, there were 2.7 million votes cast in the governor's race. Very high turnout on Tuesday. There's 1.2 million cast. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just puts it in perspective. There's so many more people to mobilize.
No, absolutely.
They're better at connecting with their soft base than we are. Well, that second level of base.
Yeah. This was a reaction against a combination of things. Obviously, the November elections statewide did not go in the Republicans' favor for any statewide office.
Right, so that got them fired up a little bit.
It did. And obviously, when Dallat won, that was a reaction against the Trump situation.
Right.
And their side increased their turnout at a higher percentage than our side did.
Yeah.
And that's really the lesson.
It's pretty depressing to see that we went up by 8%. An 8% higher turnout.
Yeah.
And it wasn't enough.
Because
they had
we couldn't
25% higher turnout. Or no, more than that. Among their voters, it was like 30% higher. But what it shows is that a conventional approach to building what passed for a majority in the low turnout Supreme Court election isn't good enough, and it shows that we have to be thinking outside the box a little bit more than we do. For instance, I know that we thought on our side that if we brought up the fact that, and honed in on being Walker's ex-lawyer, or former lawyer.
The Hagedorn being
all it would do was
Walker's former lawyer.
Right. All it would do is inflame the passions of the right and get them out to vote, remind them who to vote for. Well, the thing is, they did that anyway, and saying he's anti-gay did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the polls showed that most people aren't anti-gay, whereas people are more split on Walker. But I think people just got rid of Walker and would have felt more outraged that Walker's trying to, win a third term by
de facto
getting his old lawyer in.
That would have been a better...
Because that's essentially what was going on. Walker was trying to win a third term, and he did.
Yeah.
Through a judicial election.
Yeah.
No, he's gone, he has no job, and yet he still gets to effectively govern.
Or having his people hang around.
And Walker was very public in this thing.
Oh, yeah. No,
so this is a big victory for Scott Walker.
He was out there on Twitter and trying to compare what was going on with Hagedorn to the Kavanaugh nomination, and just trying to drum up the base.
So I think we would have been better off. I think we would have been better off saying, "Look, if this guy wins, it's like putting Walker back in."
Yeah. Once Hagedorn takes office in August, there will be a 5-2 conservative majority on the court. I think people will very quickly realize the consequences of what's going on, especially when you consider the types of cases that are coming before this court. So the most immediate...
it could be redistricting.
It could be any number of things. Now, the lame duck laws that the legislature passed once Evers won election, the court agreed today that they were going to take up. Now, they're doing it in an expedited fashion.
So it will be before Hagedorn's there.
It will be before Hagedorn is there. So
but it's still a 4-3 Republican
Shirley
majority.
Abrahamson will be involved in the arguments. Now, just looking at it from the outside, it looks like it'll be probably a 4-3 decision, unless we think that there is a conservative on the court today that will flip sides. And it doesn't really look like there's a candidate for that.
Yeah, why would anybody?
Well, you have Daniel Kelly, who's up for re-election next year, and what incentive does he have if he doesn't want to get primaried to rule against this thing?
He could rule against it in an effort to try to look more independent. Right, I think they have a pretty clear idea that next year's election isn't real favorable for them.
No, the climate doesn't look good.
Because the Democrats are going to have a primary, and the Republicans won't for president on that day.
And the results of this election should be a wake-up call to people that don't generally vote in these types of races. Like, hey, this is important.
So we should be able to probably win, provided we have at all a halfway decent candidate.
Well,
However, if they were to win, Kelly needs to distinguish himself. And what's interesting is that this sets him up with a two-tier option. One, he could decide against the lame duck clause and show a streak of independence and run on that.
Yeah, and kind of go and do the third way thing.
Right.
Be like, I am a constructionist, conservative justice. At the same time, I'm not a toady.
That could give a lot of Democratic voters pause.
Yeah. What's Kelly's history, though? I mean, have we seen...
Well, I think he might be a so-so candidate.
I'm just thinking, what is his history on these big cases, and has he demonstrated any kind of independence in the past? I think that I don't know that he has.
Another thing, too, though, is if he's afraid of losing, and this is actually, I think, is more likely to happen than the first scenario of him going for the moderate, is actually he can cast, because they're hightailing the thing through, and Hagedorn won't be there, he can cast the deciding vote in favor of the lame duck laws, and therefore excite the conservative base at a time when I think that they would depend on an excited conservative base to somehow equal the Democratic enthusiasm in the primary. And perhaps that actually does set them up better for the fall of 2020 as well.
Yeah, possibly.
To gin up the conservative base. So, and that's probably what's going to really happen, and which would explain why Pat Rogensack put it on the docket. So, to give him a chance to cast the deciding vote.
That's the motivation.
That
makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, because otherwise, why not just walk it until Hagedorn's there, and then it's a completely done deal.
Yeah. Marquette poll numbers came out last week. Trump's approval rating is up 2 points in the state of Wisconsin. However, he's still underwater. 46% approved to 52% disapproved, so not looking good.
And that's still a tick below where he was actually right before the last election when Baldwin was reelected and Evers defeated Walker.
Yeah.
So He went further down after the election. Now he kind of ticked back up a little bit.
And obviously still within the margin of error, so It's not that much different from the last result. Other things from that poll, 47% approval for Evers, 37% disapprove, 50% don't know. And
I thought that was actually a pretty good result.
I would think so.
Given Wisconsin's polarized politics.
Yeah, Evers, he's had some good news around being able to pull out of the ACA lawsuit.
Evers is running a pretty unapologetically progressive administration. However, he has a disarming personality. He does seem to seek to work with all sides. He's very believable in that sense. And there was a really good question, like, do you believe that the Republicans are working to compromise with Evers? And 22% said yes, and 56% said no, or something.
Yeah, it was pretty lopsided.
And that was significantly higher than even at the last poll right after the lame duck session. So I think that's pretty good, and it gives Democrats maybe something to look at for the legislative elections.
Yeah, or at least painting Robin Voss and Scott Fitzgerald as
real obstructionists,
right? And being disingenuous when they're talking about Evers doesn't talk to us enough.
But I think Democrats who are concerned about redistricting should think about this when it comes to trying to win the state back with the convention here. I would really look at winning one of the houses back of the legislature this year.
And you think the assembly is the more likely
I do.
scenario than the Senate?
There's so many seats that Evers ran fairly close in.
Okay.
I mean, he won by 1 percentage point. Right now he's 10 percentage points above water. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but these guys are seen by an overwhelming margin as obstructionists. I think that there's enough seats that he ran fairly close in to get to a majority if you were to win them all. If there's any time for the Democrats to try to win the legislature, it would be next year.
Yeah.
Partly because, as we've said many times before, the gerrymander, I mean, it's bad, but it's based on the last census.
Yes.
The last census is now 10 years old, or will be 10 years old by the time that election comes out. And that means that people have moved all over.
The other thing from the Marquette poll I will make a note of is Bernie Sanders leads the state of Wisconsin amongst Democratic primary voters. Just making a note of that.
Sure.
Not surprising.
I'm being cynical. Why? I don't know. Maybe I'll feel the burn still. Who knows? Feeling the boot?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I like Pete Buttigieg, but whether or not it's his time, I don't know. I mean,
very young.
You got to be bold. But,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really like that guy a lot.
Well, I think he's got a lot of buzz behind him. But whether or not it's his year, I guess, remains to be seen.
Yeah, but I don't think it's Elizabeth Warren's year.
No,
I don't
think so either.
I hate to say it, I don't think Kirsten Gillibrand's here either.
No, I don't think so either.
Kamala Harris, let's not rule her out.
I think Harris is definitely in the top 5. You still have, obviously, the whole Biden decision hanging out there. I don't know that he is going to fade. I don't think he wants his legacy to be all this flack he's gotten. At the same time, I think that the longer this thing goes on, the harder it's going to be for him to get momentum towards getting that nomination. And I don't know. I mean, I love Joe a lot. I think he's a great candidate, but I don't know. I think this has done some damage, and I don't know that.
Yeah, he's a fighter, and ultimately, this is not about Joe Biden.
No,
it's not about whether or not he's a fighter. It's about whether we're. The one thing I would say too is retreads have generally not done well for either party, especially the Democratic Party.
No, that's a good point.
I mean, let's see. We did former Vice President Gore. Mm-hmm. His name has never been President Gore. We had former Vice President Mondale.
Yeah.
Never been president. Former Vice President Humphrey, this is before my lifetime.
Yeah.
Never been president.
I mean, Nixon got it, but that didn't end well either. So.
Yeah. Well, on the other side, and Bush did.
Yeah.
But even they've had their issues with heir apparents. I mean, Romney was kind of the heir apparent in 12. That didn't work out.
Yeah. Bob Dole was just kind of the next in line in 96.
McCain in 08.
Yeah.
And then look what happens. They go for fucking Trump, who nobody seemed to want in the establishment. Look what happened. They won it.
I think a month ago it was Joe's race to lose, and now I think I think people are starting to look elsewhere. Rightly or wrongly, it has nothing to do with how Joe is as a candidate or as a person. This is a political question about who's going to be the most formidable candidate, and if Joe's taken out of water, people I think are going to jump ship.
I hate to say it for the Bern, but
a lot of people's second choice. If they're Biden people, their second choice is
Well, and
Bernie.
you've seen in Wisconsin where like Biden was way ahead, less poll. Now more people are feeling the Bern.
Yeah.
But I would say this though, even though it might not be Biden, I'm not sure I feel the Bern either because he's a retread too. The retread rule still, I would argue, applies to him.
Sure.
And I would go back to he's like a failed primary candidate.
Yeah.
Guess who was our most recent nominee that was a failed primary candidate? Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She'd failed in 2008. Before that, Gore had failed in 1988. Having retread candidates, even if they're not former
History
vice
is not on
presidents,
your side.
not in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
The last 3 Democratic presidents were Obama, Clinton, and Carter, and all 3 of them burst onto the scene in that cycle. Basically were unknowns before.
And you're
that
right to
cycle.
point out at least, that it hasn't worked at least on the Democratic side because Reagan was a retread. People forget.
Okay, Reagan was. Yeah, the Republicans tolerate them more. Even they don't seem to always it doesn't seem to always work out well for them with the retreads.
Yeah.
But even going back to before Carter, Kennedy was a first-time candidate, and lo and behold, LBJ got in. FDR, first time he had run for vice president before.
Well,
that'd be maybe but you have to go back to FDR.
You have to go back to kind of like pre-primary politics,
right?
Like back when the smoke-filled convention halls and stuff. It's different. It's a different era.
But even going all the way back there, you don't see in the Democratic side ever since, because that's about when the Democrats became the more progressive party. Was around the FDR era when they started to get more African American support than Republicans. Democrats tend to do best when they come up with new faces.
And Mayor Pete, mate,
right?
He's definitely one to watch. He's got a lot of buzz behind him. He's raising some money. I think he's got some fire behind him.
When you start thinking Kennedy, Carter, Clinton, Obama, feel the boot,
right? Right. That could be. So lots to talk about there.
I think
Obviously,
Uncle Rick is still coming up from Florida. He was thinking about driving in tonight.
We had the
he's
snow,
in his RV.
Well, we had the snow yesterday, so I think he might have turned tail and.
I think he may. There's some flea markets in southern Indiana he wanted to hit.
Makes sense.
Remember how he watches Pickers?
Yeah.
So there you go, American Pickers.
Right. All right. Well, go Bucks, go Brewers, and forward, folks.